on Thursday, March 9th. Please rise for pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take roll, please.
Commissioner Slawinski,
Here.
Commissioner Smansky,
Here.
Commissioner Weiner,
Here.
Commissioner Memberto, Commissioner McBride,
Here.
Commissioner Yoder,
Here.
Chair Whitliff.
Happy.
Thank you.
Here in spirit.
Here.
Approval agenda. At this time, the Planning Commission may approve the March 19th, 2023 agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Well,
I do have just a minor amendment to the agenda, so that we can add under new business to our work
Yeah.
session, feather flags.
well, I had a couple questions too.
What was this that you were adding?
Wants to add the feather flag. to
Discussion
the,
for feather flags.
Business.
Oh, under new business, okay.
Any discussion on that?
On the agenda approval, no.
The amended agenda.
Yeah, amended agenda, no.
Somebody want to make a motion to amend the agenda?
I make a motion that we amend the agenda to include feather flags.
Okay, so is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Take a vote, please.
Commissioner Slawinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Smansky,
Yes.
Commissioner Weiner,
Yes.
Commissioner McBride,
Yes.
Commissioner Yoder,
Yes. But if I could, I thought we can't do official business on a work session.
It's only for the minutes in the
Oh,
agenda.
just-
We won't take
yeah,
action on
but
anything else.
there's nothing else.
This
There's no
we can
action
do.
on anything
Oh, we're
else.
just correcting.
Just this, yeah.
Okay, there's no approval minutes for this work session.
Approval of minutes.
And any public comment on agenda-related items?
Uh-huh, okay.
Not all at once.
Yeah.
It appears.
Have more with duplexes or something. That'll bring them in.
Okay, we'll close the public comment, go on to new business, work session, accessory buildings on corner lots.
Yeah,
yours,
so this
Katie.
was from a couple months ago.
Uh-huh.
I put together this memo for you guys discussing the potential of an amendment to the city zoning ordinance for accessory buildings on corner lots and/or double frontage lots. We don't have many of those in the city, but they do pop up occasionally. And in my memo, I just kind of detailed that it really, looking at other zoning ordinances, it does appear that most communities will either dictate that accessory buildings must be located in a side or rear yard, or they just won't. I didn't find a lot of in-between regulation for that or specific regulation for corner lots, but I did also include in the memo something from Onekama Township, which they did have language for allowing for accessory buildings in the front yard in certain circumstances, and we further modified that to include a definition for established front yard, and then using the established front yard, which is defined as where your house fronts and your driveway comes off of, to help dictate where an accessory building can be located when you have more than one frontage. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that's an example of language that could be used for kind of, an in-between regulation, like I was saying, or, the city could simply just look to eliminate the, accessory buildings must be located inside or rear yards, or just leave it the same. So, that's, I guess that's kind of my spiel. If you guys have any questions, otherwise you can, discuss that further.
Well, we had this lady, Karen Mao. Is she, and you're familiar with that? She has
Yes.
a corner lot. Okay, she brought it up now. Will this cover her situation?
Well, what's interesting about her situation is that they haven't submitted an application yet, but I did do a site visit with her contractor, and they figured out a location on their property where they could put a detached garage that conforms to the ordinance. So this is no longer an issue for that specific property.
Okay.
It, was a property that kind of spurred the conversation.
Well, that's-
But they ultimately did figure out a way, because their house sits
Okay.
you know, in a location where it leaves them just kind of a corner of their backyard to put an accessory building, but they are going to extend their driveway and put the building back there.
That's
So
fine.
they figured out a way with that
Yeah.
property.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, she brought it up, I was just wondering, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
A lot of the homes here don't have much side
So you're,
property, you know.
Right.
And to stick some side building, it kind of is like an eye.
Off of the sidewalk,
oversized,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
I
and
know
really.
we have that ordinance that your lot has to be a certain size and so much green
Right.
space and stuff.
Yep, and we do have lot coverage requirements. You know, there's safety aspects that come into play when we start having more buildings up towards the road, but you figure that the setbacks established are there for, you know, safety reasons. We still have our clear vision corners that would have to be adhered to. So ultimately, I think it really does come down to more of an aesthetic issue. But like Mike and I were talking about, the more buildings you have closer to the road, that does create less visibility. But at the same token, you know, it's not that everyone, I think if this regulation went through, everyone's not gonna all of a sudden want to put their garages in the front. It'll just kind of open up options for people, but those are all aspects to think about.
yeah.
Now, would this obtain to like sheds and everything else?
Yes,
Yes.
yep,
okay. Not just garages.
right.
Right, accessory buildings, whatever, whatever that may be.
So my opinion, you know, if we don't address the corner lots, we're not taking anything away from anyone. And obviously, by the crowd, there's no real interest in it. So my suggestion is that we don't address it.
Yep.
Leave it as is.
Leave it as we have it, where accessory buildings are allowed, but not basically on a corner lot unless it complies with you know, how it's currently written. I think you did a good job of including accessory buildings. I think that's helpful, and so many people already had them. So what we're doing is kind of legalizing something that already existed to a vast amount of people in our community, so. But I agree, I think there's too many complications when you go to a corner. There's too many ways of it becoming a problem for us to address a single ordinance to cover it. And they always have the opportunity to come back with a special use permit.
For a variance, if they truly have no other place where they can put their building.
An opportunity to be able to meet a homeowner's requirements on a one-on-one basis if it's necessary.
Right, and that really is the purpose of a variance, you know, these ordinances, we do our best to cover
Oh,
everything
sure.
that we can,
You're never
but,
gonna get it all.
exactly, you're never gonna put everything in black and white on paper, and that's why we have those other routes forward.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that is a perfectly acceptable,
I walk around the city a
recommendation as well.
lot, there's no two corners in Manistee alike.
No.
Right,
And again, and I can tell you, there's dozens of them that have accessory buildings, and they don't look very good. I mean, you know,
and I think, you know, ultimately that is why generally we see that regulation across ordinances, accessory buildings must be located in a side or rear yard, it's very typical to see that. And, you know, just for the point that you made, that generally it does look better, when we have our accessory buildings set back from the principal
Aesthetically
building.
speaking. Yeah,
Some
aesthetically.
places terrain-wise won't allow it, and you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, that's the truth,
That's
yeah, that's the truth,
why
yeah.
it gets the people to be looked at.
Yeah, I guess that would be all right. But does that solve the issue that brought this up about the lady with the Fourth Avenue? Would that
Well-
solve her problem, this Maui?
Well, they solved their
Yeah,
own
well,
issue by
relocating.
conforming, yeah, So, I mean, if hypothetically you guys were to approve some regulation for it, it might create a little bit of, you know, alleviate some of that for
Oh.
them, but they were able to figure out a
So
way
that-
to conform to the ordinance, so.
But I mean, by leaving it the way it is, are we just gonna wait for the next person to come up, or is it gonna be covered? If-
Well, anyone with a corner lot similar to theirs will have the same issues, but, you know, kind of as Mick was saying, if they truly have nowhere else they can put it, they could always seek a variance.
Okay.
Or, you know, a property owner could always take it upon themselves to propose an amendment to the zoning ordinance if they see that that's appropriate at that time.
Right. And
So,
that's what we have now, and that's the route they would take.
right.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I say, dog
Yeah,
sleep.
we should have a lot of flexibility right now.
Yeah, in no sense, kick a sleeping dog.
Not dead in the water, yeah.
Good.
Well, and anything that we put in at this time would probably end up biting us.
Definitely.
Yeah, and one more thing to add, I will say, the corner lots, they come up, they exist. I don't see it just through my experience with talking to people in permitting. It's not as big of an issue as like the storage sheds. When I brought that before you guys,
Right.
I had seriously gotten, probably 7 people who called me and said, what, I can't put up a little shed in addition. So something like that, when it happens over and over and over again, I feel is maybe a little bit more important to address.
Right.
But the corner lots issue doesn't come up as frequently. Right.
There you
Living
go.
on a corner lot, my neighbors would not like it very much if I put up a shed on the Fifth Street side of my house.
Right.
Luckily, I have an extra lot on the other side, because I have no backyard at my house. My backyard is my neighbor's side yard. I have like 10 feet, and that's it. Yeah, I don't see
Yeah.
dealing with this. I mean, if they really don't have any other way to put up a garage or something.
Did you get this?
And then we have some flexibility to make sure that it's not gonna be something that's gonna upset all the neighbors as well.
Right. Right, and the
Yeah.
variances are very much case by case basis instead of trying to lay general regulation on, a unique situation.
I can think of a lot of them I went by in town where you see the house on the one street and there you see the garage on
On the
facing
other
the
side,
other.
yeah.
But it's been there forever.
There's quite a few houses that
Yeah.
have been, they're older houses.
Oh, wait a minute, I live on a corner. Where's my house at?
Up on the hill.
On a hill. See? My garage is on the side. So the front street would be where the garage goes out to the road? Is that what you consider the front?
So your front yard is established by any parcel line that abuts a road right of way.
Yeah.
And then when you have multiple fronts like that, you have remaining side yards. So regardless of which way your driveway or house faces currently, if whatever parcel line is on the road is considered a front yard, and that's established by your principal dwelling. So,
And a lot of times I've seen it by what the street address is for that house.
Oh,
Being in the
yeah,
front yard.
yeah.
right, and that's where like this regulation with Onekama, they put in the established front yard, but Onekama deals with a lot of situations with their platted
Lots in Onekama.
Tell me about, try surveying.
Yeah, right, and they have a lot of paper roads in their platted subdivisions where the roads haven't been developed.
And
So
they'll
it,
never be there.
right, and it appears that, someone has just a front yard if they have just one laid roadway in front of them. But then they figure out that, oh no, you have actually 3 or even some instances 4 front yards. And there's nowhere you can put a detached building at that time. So it was a little bit more pressing of an issue with the
Would imagine.
lay of the land out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Right up the.
Actually, you talk on Ekman, I was just talking to a party that were dealing with you over views. They're building a new home in, just out of Onekama, Dunewood. And, that's okay, I said, we were just, and he said, yeah, I know her. I said, we talked about trees. Can't see the lake.
Oh, interesting, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
Onekama is very specific in their ordinance.
Yeah, I say, I'm
View sheds
sure
are
you
not
got a
protected.
handful of their characters out that way. Yeah,
Try having someone hire you to do something.
yeah, oh, I can imagine, yeah.
Well, we have an awful lot of houses here too that are not very, like a half lot or something. They're
Oh,
not
yeah.
very big and you really can't
Yeah.
put much of anything in because you have that ordinance, you have to have so much green space and you
Right.
can't build.
Yeah.
So that stops a lot of that too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what do we want, a motion here, Boss Hog, or what?
No motions required, it's just discussion,
Got anything to discuss on it?
yeah,
Right, well, that's right, we can't, yeah, we're just discussing.
yep.
The,
We're gonna leave it.
recommend this to be on the next, meeting for a vote?
I guess, yeah, we could put it on there. When this was originally brought to you guys, I don't know if we even took action on it previously, but it was really just to see if you guys wanted to hold a public hearing on it. So I guess we could take that action at the next meeting.
Maybe
To
not.
not-
Let's just let it die.
They don't need to because then they have to
This,
have a public hearing 'cause it's an amendment.
No, we haven't held any public hearing. This was simply to just let
So they
it.
don't need to do anything.
I don't think it's
Okay.
necessary. I
Okay, yeah, then we can just let it go.
kicking the hornet's nest for,
Right.
just to get bit.
Get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah,
No,
yeah.
because it would just be action to not hold a public hearing,
They could do that. but
Right.
they just let it-
but it's not needed.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be fine.
Okay,
That takes,
I mean, just this way it's, sets an area, the direction for you guys to leave it as is, dealing with it.
right,
That's what we were after, some direction, and that's what we have.
yes.
Okay.
I just got a message from the boss.
What
Right.
happened? Did we do okay? Did we do
No
okay?
public hearing.
Leave as is, leave as
Oh.
is.
Did he text you?
We don't need to get
Can he still hear us? Is he good?
Must be, because he texted me,
She
there's no
checks on
public.
the public,
Oh, no public hearing.
you voted
Yeah.
the same.
All right.
Right.
It's just like,
We can go on to the next one.
Okay,
Okay.
that takes care of that. Let's go on to discussing feather flags.
And I do have a comment from Mark for the group. His thoughts is to just leave it as is. He doesn't want to touch the ordinance as it relates to feather flags. That,
Who wants it this way?
Mark
Oh,
wanted
Mark
me to
the
share
boss?
that comment,
Oh.
with the commission, yep, that he would prefer to just not amend the ordinance at all as it relates to feather flags currently.
The ordinances on them?
So currently, the zoning ordinance does not address feather flags, but because feather flags are not identified and zoning is not permissive, when something's not identified, whether it's a type of structure, a type of use, we can't allow for it because there's no regulation to regulate it. So with feather flags not being identified in the ordinance as an allowable type of sign, they're just simply not allowed until regulation is incorporated for them. The way I explained it to the business owners that I had enforced on is that, without a specific regulation, I can't say if you're allowed 1, if you're allowed 2, if you're allowed 10, how big they can be, can they have words on them?
How long they can be out?
Right, so there's no regulation as it exists currently for feather flags. This public hearing was requested by the city manager to incorporate them as a prohibited sign so that it's clear to business owners that feather flags are not allowable, because, it kind of is a confusing concept, that zoning's not permissive. It's opposite of like when you think of written laws that the police enforce, that if there's no law for it, then go for it, but it's the opposite for zoning. So, yeah.
All for it.
Bill wanted us to have that in the zoning ordinance, that feather flags are not allowable, to find them and put it under prohibited signs. But the discussion at the planning commission meeting kind of went the opposite direction, and so that's why we're gonna have, this item on the work session to discuss it further, because if that's something that if you guys do want to incorporate regulation for feather flags, that's something we can work through, and that would be the recommendation on the amendment.
I think there is a little bit of confusion within the zoning ordinance, because it does talk about like flags being allowed, and the distinction between feather flags and flags isn't really there, but what it's really referencing is when it talks about flags, it's talking like American flags or like the open flags you see, but there's really no clear distinction between the two. And what Katie's saying is completely true. Like zoning's not permissive. It doesn't really say that, it's not allowed or it's allowable, so it's not. It's kind of like, the way I like to explain it to people is, I want to operate a slaughterhouse in a residential district right next to Pam's house. The zoning ordinance doesn't say I can't do that.
Because slaughterhouses aren't an identified use, yeah.
Right, so, but I can't because it's not allowed in that zoning ordinance, or in that district. So that's kind of how I explain it to people, is like, you wouldn't want to live next to a butcher shop in a residential neighborhood. It's not allowable in that district as a use, so therefore it's not allowable. It's the same thing with feather flags. They're not allowable in the zoning ordinance, so therefore they're not allowed. But there is a little bit of a hiccup in there with the flags being allowed, but it's really for, the flags were really in there for the American flag and the Michigan state flag, and then like those open flags that you see that people put everywhere. It wasn't necessarily for a feather flag on, to be put out at the road. And so there was a distinction that wanted to be made in this,
Right.
that said, hey, these are really not allowed, and there's a difference between the flag that we say are allowed and these are not. And that's, I think, what Bill was trying to get across.
Yeah, yeah. First, yeah, I think we have to have a definition of a flag, yeah.
Anybody?
Well, to me, I think they're less offensive than half of the signs or more that we already have in town. So, I don't know, I can't see why we're so upset about, a business having a temporary feather flag that's, basically saying, hey, there's a business here, I'm open, versus the blinking tower of insanities that we have on multiple locations in town.
Yeah.
How about one of them big balloons or that balloon?
Oh, they sent it.
See, well, there you go, yeah,
But,
but, yeah.
Gorilla up on
big
the roof.
gorilla.
And I think the idea behind it is if you guys do want to allow them, like how do you want to allow them? Because the other problem that you're going to run into is, do you really want to see feather flags up and down River Street?
Right.
Everybody has one out. They're crowding the sidewalk. Whatever. Is this what you guys want? And then they are a distraction to drivers going down the roadways. Like they do grab your attention.
Well, that's what they're there for, though.
Yeah.
Right.
I realize that, but you guys are making light of the guy, the wiggly guy, but it's the same idea.
Yep.
So it's
Same idea.
the other thing is if you guys, some people had said that they want to make them, well, let's look at maybe possibly at grand openings, or temporarily allowing them. The problems that you run into with those are it becomes very hard for us to enforce it. So when you look at regulation, you have to look at the enforceability of it. So, by the time, somebody puts them out, and we've seen this when we were enforcing on them, when we said, hey, these were not allowed over the summer, is we tell one person they weren't allowed, they'd pop up over here. We tell them they weren't allowed, they'd pop up over here, and they're literally popping up everywhere.
Yeah, and I will say that I was, with staff time, I was struggling to enforce, and this was just over a couple weeks of getting to all these businesses one after another. And by the time I got to like the third business, the first business I had told had put theirs back up because they said, well, I see other people with them still up. So it kind of became my summer feather flags.
It was a tremendous amount of staff time.
So we're distinguishing, again, here I'm going to go back to the devil's advocate. So if I have a flag that says open and I have it hanging on my building, that's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've never had
See what I'm
issues.
saying? So, we're,
But what kind of flag? We
Well,
haven't
that's the other
Is
thing.
there a size regulation?
There is a size
Yes.
regulation, and the feather flags, people were putting up multiple, and they were not getting permits for them. They are also varying sizes.
now, could we establish that that feather flags are possible by permit?
I mean, you could always do that. There's other things that need to be taken into consideration, and that's why you're doing the work session tonight as far as how do they need to be anchored.
And how
Well-
long
How big are
gonna
they?
stay out?
But again, couldn't we establish a permitting process for feather flags?
Yeah, I would say that if that's the route we wanted to go, they would just be considered, another sign on the property, and someone would have to pull a sign application for that. I think that the anchoring is a good point, and establishing, potentially specific setbacks. I know that we have a 4-foot front setback for monument signs, or the ground signs.
Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head how specific that is, if that could also be applied to something like a feather flag.
Something
But then
also height of the flag.
the height,
Yeah, we
Yeah.
adjust
Right.
heights of them.
Because some of them are huge.
I'd also look at like wind, like in windy days, not placing these out. They could be ripped off. I mean, these are just fiberglass poles. I mean, they're really cheap.
I know.
And if they go into a permitted sign now goes into, the freeway and causes an accident, or the freeway, I'm sorry, our highway, and causes an accident, that's an issue too. I'm just saying, trying to be on the other side of it, thinking
Playing
about,
devil's advocate.
yeah, with Nick, and just saying, yeah, there's, usually our signs are secure.
Right.
These may not necessarily be that way. And I'm not saying that they can't be, they could be permanent. They just have to be thought about how we're going to be anchoring these in. There's also the areas that you're seeing, these are traditionally the ones that you guys and the businesses, not all of them, but some of them that have looked at them and have asked us about them, have been some of the ones that can't have those types of signs. So are we going to open this up for some of our special use permitting processes with the marijuana district where a lot of these signs were popping up? So,
Yeah, 31 has quite a few of those fan flags, you know, out there, them long feather ones.
Yeah,
that's
that's where
what
they
we're
were
talking about,
popping up
yeah.
over the summer, kind of down Arthur Street, the Arthur Street segment of 31.
and then over by
Yeah, pretty much.
Westkill.
Yeah, pretty much all through 31 is where we saw them. There was one that popped up on Washington.
There's one on-
They could not have these signs?
Yes, they were made aware.
I mean, they didn't know it at the time they put them up.
No, they did not know at the time.
Nor did they ask.
That's my next question.
Right.
Yeah,
They
and
just went
But
ahead
I
and did.
think most businesses would not assume, especially on a highway like that, they would assume that they would have no way of knowing that they weren't allowed. Because it's just such a big marketing.
I think that, you know, if I'm a business owner, I'm aware there's permitting requirements that are required in the city. I had to pull a business registration. Any signage I've put up in the past, I've had to get a permit. You know, what would exempt me from doing this now? It was, while I think they're great and they really do pull people's eye in, I don't want to say people were just circumventing the ordinance, but that was exactly what seemed to be happening.
Yeah,
We've had so
Or-
many empty
yeah.
buildings on
I
31.
believe it.
And a lot of the new, like that AJ's and that, they put them fan flags so people would know.
Know that there's something
Right
here.
back off the road.
Yeah, like
Maybe
we're
that's
back
some-
open, we're existing, yeah, and I think that was, you know, I'm more inclined to have it, you know, to think that like with a grand opening to re-let people back know that they're available
Right.
might be all right, but there has to be some real clear guidance and guidelines on this and what it requires, because the wind does kick through there. And, you know, we've had some high wind days and these things were not anchored. They were just on these like spidery, like pole, like 8-leg things that,
'Cause
They're lots of
most
fun,
that
but
It's
they're
all
lots of
paved
fun.
parking in a lot of those buildings, so you can't put them in the ground.
you can always bust up the concrete, but,
Yeah.
Well, and I think with the idea of them being a more temporary thing, that might be one of the reasons behind why people maybe didn't think that a permit was required. You know, it's something that I just put out on certain days. But yeah, also going back to the safety aspect of it, it's, you know, if they're temporary and they're gonna be removed and such, how exactly would that look if they're allowed?
So you were, like Mick was saying, as far as the permit application, if we were to set something like that up, that they would have to come through you, would that help the situation at all?
I mean, I think that requiring a permit would be appropriate just with some of the safety
Otherwise, you
concerns
will
and
chase
such.
them down.
Right. But I don't think that, you know, either way, if the regulation exists, they have to adhere to it, and I would be following up on that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, a permitting process would also be completely appropriate, whether they were some kind of like exempt temporary sign or we wanted to make them
Right.
a sign that's permitted. I would
Well-
recommend incorporating regulation either way so that they're, you know.
You could make that decision, or, you know, with the
There should be
owner.
a time limit though, if it's a grand opening or something like that.
You know, certain restrictions that
Yeah.
we would place on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Certain time frame, certain times of the day, things like that.
I don't know, but I'm gonna get him.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what's easier for you, or make it more accessible, and rather than chase them around, I mean, I don't know. If that's what the,
After a while, they get pretty bad looking and it looks crummy.
well, if, yeah, that's true, and they don't take maintain it.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's right, there's gotta
Well,
be,
even an American
I can
flag,
double
or,
down on
you know, again, I tell people all the time, including when the flag
Right.
starts to get frayed, it's about time for them.
yeah,
We had to replace one at the fire station 3 times
I
a year.
couldn't
Yeah,
do
well,
it.
again, around
Yeah,
here,
well,
Down
yeah.
River Street,
Uncommon.
so wicked, they get
yeah,
torn.
turn right down, yeah. The kids give me one on my birthday on
Yeah,
the other day.
Well, problem was.
Determined, yeah, American flag or what kind of flag?
We couldn't. the
Yeah, to that point too, that would make
Now
a
it's-
difference. You could determine what type of flag if they were to come to you with an application.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely put it in the regulation that, you know, it has to be this size,
American
this
flag
material.
or that kind of a flag,
You know,
yeah.
whatever we want it to look like. I know that this is all really good discussion, and I know it is your recommendation which way you guys want to go with this, but I do want to remind that coming from the city manager, this wasn't the direction that we wanted to go, so this still will have to go to council regardless of which way we go. So I just want to make sure we keep that in our minds as well. If we spend a bunch of time developing regulation, when it gets to council, what will that look like? But ultimately, this is your show and, you know, what you guys want to do, whatever you recommend, but I just wanted to kind of keep that in our minds as well.
And you know, again, I would think that, you know, part of council would not be opposed if we had a way of managing it.
Right, and we had it buttoned up nicely and,
Because there are certainly, you know, opportunities for us to be able to promote a business temporarily
right,
that doesn't hurt. And everyone has an opportunity, and we want to build opportunities for our
Right.
business community. So
Yeah.
I hate to take away a good marketing tool, carte blanche.
right. Well, and I think that with putting a time frame on them, the enforceability of something like grand openings is much more feasible than, you know, special events or multiple times a year, because that just becomes a whole cat and dog chase for myself when,
Right.
you know, someone says, well, I have a sale this week, but I have a sale next week too, and actually the week after, you know, because then it becomes a little bit
Everything's a special
arbitrary.
event.
Yeah, well, again, and then you limit, you know, again, for things like that, for sales, you say, you know, look, you know, you have, you know,
Yeah,
4
yeah.
times a year is the
Right.
maximum amount of time, or
I would not go.
Or even
4
once,
times.
once or twice, I mean.
once a year or whatever.
Yeah,
Is there a limit on, like,
Grand
your
opening.
yeah, or just grand openings.
Got
First
so many
Street
coming
is
up.
every weekend, you know, by the fire.
I know exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, also
Yeah.
just the fact that when there's a new business, you know, sometimes it takes a long time to get a sign approved,
By the fire department.
And something like that is a more
to get it
feasible.
made, and then to be able to have at least something identifying your business, so you're not going 60 days or 90 days with no recognition that you're in existence.
Yeah.
Right,
That's like them 2 kids that opened that
Uh-huh.
auto garage. Where's that at in the paper? Does anybody know?
What one?
The business they own?
They had it in the newspaper.
It's in
or
Park.
two is even a long time.
By the tackle stop there,
It used to be the tire store, I believe. Used to be
Yeah.
Discount Tire.
That's
So
enforceable.
these kids that opened the
Right.
store, and that was the story they had in the paper. a
Like, all
couple
right,
of
then
days.
that's all we're doing is.
They're dead.
Chasing signs.
Yeah, it's just,
Sorry.
No,
Good.
we're discussing like what we think would be reasonable and.
Uh-huh, just the enforceability of like a
Well,
grand
and I
opening.
imagine other cities have something similar. I mean, you know, again,
I mean,
we don't wanna create,
a
you
lot of
know.
them, a lot of them do. I mean, there's other things that are taken into consideration when you look at these, like, you know, speed along the roadway.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
there's a reason they're putting them on 31 to grab people's attention.
Right.
Yeah.
It's because it's our fastest moving road.
Yeah.
And so but you know, we're talking maybe 60 or 90 days on a grand
For
opening.
grand opening.
Because we're discussing, you know, 4 times a year, even if we gave them for sales, is impossible for us to track down.
Right, as much as it would be nice to have more options for people.
one time a year and or grand opening. They could-
I
they
would
could
just say
make a
grand opening to
temporary-
get people, like, we are here, grand opening.
Yeah.
And that's it, because
And
if
I
we,
would really limit it, though. I would go less than 30 days.
well,
30 days?
I would say 60, because sometimes,
Well, we wanna be,
we want them to be successful.
we wanna be
And-
business friendly, you know, we're
and-
not,
Yeah, because
Well,
we've
yeah.
had so many empty businesses.
Yeah.
We don't want to discourage.
You know, and we kicked around 90 while you guys were talking. And I was like, that's too long. And then I was like, 30's too short. 60 feels good, because and then it's enforceable, because we issue out a business registration. We know when we signed it,
Yeah.
and we know when they can do it. Now, if we start giving them, you know, oh, you can have it one time a year. Well, nobody comes in at the same time
Right,
one time a
exactly,
year.
yeah, you're right. It would-
We're
it
just
would
gonna be
become a
chasing
challenge. Yep.
I'm thinking also of some of these seasonal places where they're closed all winter, just maybe a week, one for a week or so yes, we're back open for the year.
What is closed during the winter that comes open besides Dairy Queen?
What's that?
what is it?
What does it? Well, I'm not sure what in town is, but there's one just outside of town.
Okay, and then the only thing I would say is to exempt them, they would not be allowable in like residential districts is what I would say as well. Just for the simple fact of,
Because nothing to say we're not gonna have any seasonal businesses come into town sometime or another. You know, that they're only open certain times of the year. That's entirely.
So right now, if I have my big inflatable up at Christmas time, I'm breaking the regulations.
residential places are usually exempt from things like Christmas decorations are usually exempt within sign ordinance.
Yeah, that's a whole
Decorations
nother.
that were in front of one of the marijuana places, they had, there for a while, they were always having a blow up. Drove me crazy, because it was always trying to get in the road.
I remember that one.
Yeah, we've,
I
I
have a
think
bigger
that,
problem with
I
that
think
than
I know
the
which one you're
butterfly.
talking about. I think that was addressed before I was taking over the city potentially.
I know Christmas decorations are exempt in residential neighborhoods, but that's a commercial district, and I think that was looked at by Zach previously, and I don't know the outcome off the top of my head.
You probably want to talk to the chamber too, because they're really encouraging businesses to decorate for Christmas, so.
Yeah, but what I was complaining.
Oh, I know,
about is
yeah, the
not
monkey, they had the big
Yeah.
gorilla, I know where you're talking about.
Yeah,
And they got Shamrock Guy usually out there, and
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
right now,
does all
we have,
holidays.
in front of the senior center,
yeah.
once a week, the health department or some medical group comes and they do drive-through COVID testing. And they put a couple of those, feather flags, or whatever you wanna call them, by one door, so that people know where to come and drive through, but they take them when they're done testing.
Citizens arrest.
I mean, it's all about enforceability. That's the big thing. You know, one thing we often get hit on, and I probably shouldn't say it too loudly, but people ask us, you know, what if I'm doing a garage sale over the weekend? And we always say, well, we don't work weekends. If it's gone by the time we get back on Monday morning, and you're not doing it every weekend,
Right.
it's probably not an issue. And it's probably the same thing I'm saying with the drive up thing.
Yeah, we don't put
It's
them up,
not.
but they do so that people know
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
place
all,
to come.
Yeah, all planning law is nuisance law. Is it a nuisance? And if it isn't,
Right.
we usually try to let it go. When we look at things, we're looking from health and safety. That's why we're like, hey, well, there needs to be some regulation in case one of these blow in the road or,
Right.
you know, whatever.
No, safety.
You know, distracting drivers. Those are things that like we're like, okay, but you know, do we want them to grab your attention? Yes. Maybe a grand opening is the time for it to grab your attention. It's like, oh, what's that? You know, and like pull you back in instead of your daydreaming, like, oh, I gotta do the laundry. And, oh, okay, what's that? And then I think it becomes also a better tool to let you know. Because if I just see them all over the place, I just turn on my blinders and I don't care anymore.
Just like the billboards around town.
Yeah. You know, but if it's once in a while and something pops up and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, okay, that I could see. So maybe grand opening is the amount in 60 days and no more. It would be appropriate.
Well, I know on 31,
I'd
there
go.
for a while when Denise was planning, she'd run around, they'd put, like the Elks would put a sign, fish fry or something down the road, and those were illegal at that time.
I mean, a
An
lot of other
off-premise
cities.
sign. Yep, those are still illegal. Any
Yeah.
sign that's promoting your business off your site is not allowable outside of billboards.
Especially if
but-
they're doing weekend after weekend after weekend. Like, I'll make time in the weekend to come and pick your sign up.
But you could have a sandwich sign in front of your building.
What's that?
You can have a sandwich sign in front of your.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes for River Street too. I
That's
know that
River
they
Street.
don't technically own the sidewalk, but they
But
are
they are
allowed to
allowed to
have
do
Right,
an
I thought that was passed.
But they have to be
a while back.
pulled in at night
Right.
when they close their business. It's
I
only
think
during
everyone
business
on
hours.
River Street's pretty good about.
Yeah, they pretty much
Pulling
know
them in.
that.
Have to have
Yeah.
a permit
Except
for
the Golden
putting out the
Circle.
tables and stuff in the road.
Yeah, that's
That's-
covered under a group policy.
Yeah, that's through,
The DDA.
Yeah, DPW and police really look at that. We don't permit it through zoning, cause technically those are all public
You know-
right of ways, and zoning's really more private property.
You know, actually, he does a good business.
Does he?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things that like when we look at we don't do in Manistee that a lot of other cities do, and like a lot of them will have their DPW just pick up signs in the right of way,
Right.
that are out that aren't permitted. They know they're not permitted. They'll just pick them up, throw them in in the back of their truck and take them to the DPW, and you can come pick them up there.
The police department actually does that in the city.
So
I've
there you
had
go.
to pick up real estate signs quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pam's like, I know.
Dan's like been there, guilty.
They weren't necessarily mine, but I was told to go get them.
Yeah, it's still amazing though how many signs you'll see in the right of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they
I-
pop
I-
up
you know,
everywhere.
They're everywhere, and I think
At
that
least a dozen or two.
It's kind of one of those endless battles, I would say. Same with posting the signs on the,
Roofers
Telephone poles.
are
Guilty?
specifically guilty of that. I see, there's roofers and siding companies, so.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I typically get them because I'm on a corner in my yard, and I put them underneath the stop sign so I can mow around them. And I'm like, you can leave them up, I don't care, and I just mow around them. But I'm outside the city, and it's not like the
Yeah.
the road commission's coming around and picking them up. So I just let them there and mow around them. But,
something
so
that,
if you put out your sign, put it underneath the stop sign.
something that did just come to mind, I did update the city manager after our planning commission meeting, and when I did pose to him, kind of the direction that it seemed it was going with our work session, he did seem, like he was starting to open up to the idea of, okay, maybe just for once or twice a year or something to that effect. And I apologize for not mentioning that previously, but that did just come to mind, that he was warming up to the idea of that, for specific type events
So,
and how we want.
With some of the language that Katie gave you though as well, like that might be, do you guys like that language as far as adding that sign definition in there?
Yeah, because we can still use a lot of this if that's the direction that we want to go. I would still want to see a definition for feather flag. They wouldn't necessarily have to be under prohibited. I would probably talk to George about how to craft this, but if they should be under prohibited with a disclaimer, only for certain, only for grand openings up to
only
60
with
days.
the business registration.
Or if we would
allowable
just.
for 60 days or something.
Right, put that regulation somewhere else within the sign ordinance specifying
definitely a
that
size
they're
limit.
only.
And there's some.
There's a 5 to 15 feet tall is
Yeah.
typically
We
the
don't
size.
need the 15-foot tall ones.
They
And
already
that-
exist.
That could be, we could look to lessen that as well. That was just through my research of typical feather flags and how they're usually defined into the,
Average.
the sizes that we typically
Yeah.
see for
You
them.
see 3 sizes. What are they? They're 5, 10, and 15, or are they 5, 12, and 15?
I saw a couple ranges that were like 4 to 16, so I think they really do vary. And with this being such a popular marketing tool, when you get on Google, there's a million companies online that you can find them. I'm sure there's companies that do them at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Oh, sure.
I'm sure that
And-
there's.
And they're
right.
cheap. That's the other thing. They're
So
extremely cheap.
if we didn't want to see 15 feet tall, we could look to modify that to be some lesser height.
The city seems to go with 8 feet a lot, like under 8 feet
Yeah.
for like the
But
sign.
The fences are.
But again, I
fences are
think-
6, so 8 isn't bad.
I think having the larger, again, a lot of it depends on your terrain, and there's so many other factors that I hate to
Right.
just carte blanche say no, because then you may, like I said, if you have a monument sign, well, anywhere to be seen, again, on a small property, it would have to be somewhat larger, so.
Right. Well, and if we're thinking about regulation for, public health and safety first and foremost, and then aesthetics secondly, is it that big of a difference to have it be, if we said only a 5 to 10 foot range, does 10 to 15 feet really make that big of a difference for what we're assessing?
Right.
I don't know. That
Or-
would be up to you guys.
And
but-
then like, do you want them, can they go within the setback? Do they have to be pulled back off the setback? Like, those are other considerations that, as you guys look to develop language.
Yeah.
Timeframes from times of the day to be out.
Right.
Well, I think if they're securing them properly,
I would say
Well,
nothing,
sure.
again, unless in the other, outside of the commercial district, I would say nothing in the setback.
And I think this
I
is
mean, in the commercial district, that's all you have is the setback.
permit
so-
that we can keep
Right.
track of when they got it.
Yeah.
so the way to do that is every new business, if you're gonna do it for grand openings, has to register with the city business registration. We sign off on those stating that they've met zoning. So if they come in and they say, hey, we'd like to put up this sign with our grand opening,
Right.
Katie could sign off on that and give them 60 days from when she signs it, or when the clerk signs off on it stating that.
60 days from the opening date.
For the open.
Right.
Because it may be, it may be 3 months before they actually open.
That's true too.
Oh, yeah.
It'd have to be from the opening
Yeah,
date.
and they'd have to
Well,
specify
that's
that.
common sense, Christ, you can't give them an opening date if they're not open.
Yeah, yeah, because I was thinking that might be a good idea to just go off the business registration, and then we wouldn't have to worry about additional permitting, but, yeah, the counter to that is that just because someone's registered it as a
Still do
business.
You
it, but,
just
but they
add an
would
extra
have to
line.
identify
When
the
they're gonna
dates,
open.
When they're
what their
opening.
60
Yeah, they'd
days
have-
Yeah.
And if they're like, well, we're not sure, we're like, well, we're gonna require you to put a date in here,
Yeah.
best guess.
And then you can, and then they can always come back and say, I need to modify the date, as long as it's
Right.
not.
Right.
Yep, I agree.
I like that, because then we're not necessarily subjecting them to an additional land use permit. And a lot of times, I mean, we can utilize our land use permits for temporary structures, but more so they are for permanent type things, the land use permits. So I do think it would be completely appropriate, you know, pending conversation with the city clerk to make sure she's on board, to just kind of add that as a line to the business registration, if that's the route that we want to go, allowing them for, you know, up to 60 days for grand openings. And then, as I indicated previously, just because it doesn't require a permit doesn't mean that we can't incorporate regulation in the zoning ordinance that has to be adhered to. So it could, the regulation could be reflected in the zoning ordinance, but the business registration could kind of act as a permit in itself for the time frame for that type of
Yeah,
signage.
you could even say in here, you could even prohibit them outside of a valid business registration on file and opening day with 60 days after it. So you could actually put that language added in there, what you see with on there, but then add it under like prohibited, except, you know, on a business opening and a valid business registration on file with the clerk with an opening date specified 60 days after. And that might be a cleaner way of doing it, saying these aren't allowed, except if you're opening a business and you get a valid registration and then
And here's the dates.
yep, and you have to put, and then they do that, and then they're still subject to the penalties and fines within the civil infraction if they don't remove them after the 60 days.
Yeah.
So that might be a way, and then everybody else knows I'm not allowed to have them
Right.
unless I'm opening a business,
Unless you're. with-
and then I'm allowed to have them for 60 days
Yeah.
with a valid business registration stating the date that I will open. So that might be a way to do it too. That would be clean, really clean.
Seems like it wouldn't
Just
be
gotta
that
take a
hard to
look, get something
dictate.
written up and that's presentable.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what we would do, if you guys wanted to hold a public hearing on this.
We did already hold a public hearing, but it might,
You could amend the language.
right, so we could just continue off of this.
Did it get
We
pushed
did a
back?
public hearing on the flags, on the,
Yes, we did have a public hearing at the last meeting.
Oh.
I missed that one. too.
And I can talk to George about if it's appropriate to continue off of that one, or if we've kind of gone in such a different direction that it would be most appropriate to just kind of
Rehold.
rehold it. It definitely wouldn't hurt.
For further
We
discussion.
tabled it
Yes.
for tonight.
Yes, we tabled it until the April meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh,
they should be able to pick it right back up on the
Right.
meeting. So,
Okay.
and then make their, I think that would be, I think it would satisfy all parties. And
Yeah.
you know, that it pushes forward what the direction the city manager wanted to go into while also giving leeway to the
business
the
owner.
business owners.
was there a large representation or any representation from the business community at that meeting? 'Cause
No.
I must have been, well,
I will say that
Alexis.
they don't always watch the paper, but
yeah.
some flexibility, I think, from the business community would be appreciated, especially at a grand opening, because that was the main concern that we were hearing.
Right.
Was that we want people to know that we're here, and 60 days seems like the right amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that would satisfy the people that are opening new businesses that had, you know, because it is a cheap way. I think these signs are the feather flags only run about $200 to $300, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're probably gonna
Or
bring it
less.
cheaper.
Yeah.
And so, but those are the aluminum ones, not the PVC ones. And, you know, and then we'd have to develop a little bit more language on this as far as how they should be secured.
Yeah.
Cause there is high winds out there. And then, you know, maybe that's something we can talk to.
But there again, wouldn't that might
For
just
some of the height
com-
limitations would come in.
common
What's that?
sense? I mean, if you're gonna put a,
Height limitations come in.
People don't have.
Well, typically, like, your signs are inspected by a building inspector, but
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
building inspectors, so like, for me to say, hey, this meets this requirement, or it's not gonna get blown away in a 50-mile-an-hour wind, or whatever it may be, a gust, I can't make that call, so we have to check with somebody before we bring language forward, who is an engineer essentially. So we have one of those, they're the city.
How does that affect us at the senior center? We don't put them up, but like the nursing program for the day puts some up. Now, we have a hot rod, a car show that puts a thing in the front of our building one day. They put some up.
So I will always ask, I mean, I know it's on.
How do you get a one day, and how do we enforce that they can't put them up unless
So
they show us
are you
a
going to city
permit?
council and requesting a temporary use permit?
Oh.
'Cause
For-
You know,
council
that
can
would be
do
the other
that.
thing is on a special, we could also include
Yeah.
that, special use permits may require, or that might be something that could be included in a special use permit.
I'm sorry, it's a temporary activity permit.
Well, we call them it's a,
Yeah, special event permit.
A special,
Yeah, the zoning ordinance
They should
actually
be.
already does contain language under Article 21 signs that city council has the authority to dictate signage for temporary activities.
so that would be how, so as long as you do a special event permit request,
But
then.
see, us, we don't put them up, the group that.
But they should be
Right,
coming
but-
before
But they would
council.
still have to.
Have to get the.
Exactly,
Yes.
and then that could be allowed as part of it to have feather flags and things like that.
Well, and
for
that
an
question
event.
came up regarding the farmer's market as well. I know I brought it up at staff meeting, cause I was kind of under the impression that maybe the farmer's market was getting a temporary activity permit from council. And it was explained to me that they did get one when it was in the parking lot, but not anymore being on the senior center property. I do still think it would be appropriate for the farmer's market to get a temporary activity permit, and then those feather flag signs could be covered under that
So
temporary activity permit.
one thing we have yearly, and I believe they're still doing it, is, you know how the homeless shelter in the church? They come in once a year, I believe we started that when me and Mick were on there, that they started coming before city council and they request it, cause they can only give them a permit for
Just on
6
a timer,
months.
just went off.
And, that's the maximum amount of time they can give them, but if you look at 6 months, the farmer's market only runs 6 months. Like, cause
Not even really.
you know,
May
it's,
through
it's most activities are only 6 months,
beginning
so
of
like,
October.
even if you were like, we wanna do it once a month throughout the summer, you know, you guys are doing the check-in for COVID test drive-through, they could come before council, request that and say, we're gonna be here this many amount of times and request that. And then our signage is gonna be such, and that, you know, it just lets them know what's going on, if there's any kind of detours, you know, that they need to make. But really, like, the senior center may or may not be approved for that use, and that just kind of covers you on that. And then, you know, they can ask additional questions like, well, what's your liability insurance if somebody gets hurt? Does the seniors cover that, or do you cover that? You know, those are questions that then can arise from that, you know, that conversation. Like, well, you're doing an event, who's covering the insurance and liability?
Yeah.
So in your language, could we put something in there that would say, address
Yeah.
special use or special events?
Specific to feather flags?
Well, yeah,
or-
to signage in general, feather flags and others,
That already, it does exist.
okay.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yep.
but you could put a C for special events, CX. Just a reference, so if somebody's reading this saying that they can't do it, but then there's something that would guide them saying that it is already permitted under something
Is
else.
signage already addressed that? I think it's in there, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think I understand what you're getting at. Under the specific section for feather flags,
Right.
point back to that regulation
Just
again.
go back and have it something that would just circle back into it.
You wouldn't necessarily need to do it under feather flags, it should be all signage.
Oh, yeah, right, but somewhere in
fine.
there that would address going backwards
Right.
so
I
that
thought it
Oh,
was in
right
there.
here.
if somebody was
Yeah.
doing,
Put a big sign up on the corner.
Yeah, see, it's right here. It's already existing in the procedures under signage.
The city council may approve exceptions to this Article 21 for community events.
perfect.
So, yeah, so I thought it was in there, so.
Historic Commission can
Yeah,
Good.
because the farmer's
Yes.
market put a big wood, post and a sign saying farmer's market there, and it's still, it's there all year round.
Oh, that one's permanent?
They should be pulling a,
Actually, I think it may have a permit. I think that one does. I think they bought an existing permitted sign for that.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, check. I thought it had a, I
Marlene's
thought,
ratting everybody out, Roger.
Listen,
Hey, check, I thought it had a,
Out of the board, eh?
is it on your property or is it the one on your property? Well, then it's probably not permitted.
Right on that corner when you come down.
Be still, Marlene, be still.
Well, I don't wanna later get a ticket, I wanna have us covered. so
You know,
We have to
really it
get a
would be-
permit, we'll do it, you know?
You know,
know,
we
you
have
could al-
special cells for,
You could always,
for sign.
you could always amend the special use permit too, that the senior center has to include that signage. And I don't know, the planning commission may look favorably on it, I don't know.
So I just wanna,
Isn't that through Chamber, the farmer's market and that? They're the ones that should put,
Another thing you guys could do, if you traditionally hold your events in a certain area, you guys could look to amend, instead of having them repeatedly people go before city council, you could look to amend the special use permit for the Wagner Center there and just say, in this area, we've approved, temporary events such as, small.
farmers markets.
Small scale, or
yeah.
small scale gatherings, farmer market, those types of things, and amend your permit. And then say, and we allow temporarily these signage to come up that will be taken down or something
Yeah.
along those lines, and that you can approve that as part of that activity, knowing that they're gonna be taken down.
because that car show, they used to be over at the muzzle loaders and now they use our
Yeah.
front.
Right.
And then in the summer, we'll have music or something set out on the side of the building. So all that could be incorporated under one special use permit.
Yeah, you just add your uses to it, so, and then, the questions that you're gonna be looking at is liability coverage, and who's gonna be responsible for that, so like, the other thing is your signage, so you already have a farmer's market signage, you might wanna just incorporate that's gonna be a permanent sign as part of your special use permit.
We will have to make sure that those are allowable
Uses in your
that
district.
district, but I think that the temporary activity permits through council is another route forward.
If this doesn't work.
If we can't incorporate it through zoning,
Right.
that to just make sure we have, some kind of overarching or individual temporary activity permits through council, because they can more so approve exceptions to
Yep.
like signage and things as well.
Yeah, you'll be
So-
limited to whatever the signage is in the zoning ordinance, cause it's not a PUD, it's a special use permit. So then, like, you can look to add those additional uses, and you can dictate on your site plan a specific area that you're going to allow those uses. You kinda seen this when we did the Ironworks building, when they had the growing area.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we said, you can grow within this area. So you could do that, and then,
Really?
yeah, temporary uses, well, they changed their special use a long time ago and amended that out, but, yeah, you can basically amend that and then
So you could,
add those
you could
uses.
break that.
If they're allowable.
Ironworks down into several different areas for different.
You guys already did, I mean, think about when you guys did the Ironworks, you did, I think it was
divide it.
51% grow with a retail or retail
Vice
trade.
versa.
Yeah.
And then there was another aspect at one point in time where they're growing on the side in boxes of soil
Yeah.
for the farmer's
That
market.
was community garden.
Yeah.
Community
And that was
garden.
added
Okay.
in there, and then they amended it out, and when they said they were gonna do the marijuana grow, cause they were gonna fence in that whole area and pave it
Yeah.
over.
But that's all, they're not gonna do that now in that.
No, now that
No.
we're discussing it, that permit actually did expire, I think,
Yeah.
6 days ago.
Yep, so
It's
just
like
to
March
let you guys
3rd.
know that as well, yeah, so, but that was like you see how they amended the permit, you guys can continue to do that, so think of it as, it's fluid, it's not
Yeah.
permanent, like.
It's not chiseled in stone.
Right.
I just want to go over my notes. I think that generally we have a good idea of what we want to put together for feather flags, but I just want to double back with you guys and make sure this all sounds right. So we're thinking grand openings only for 60 days. We'll have to have language for them to be properly secured, which will run by the city building inspector as well as the city engineer for their thoughts on that. We were saying only allowed in the commercial districts, or not in residential districts, or are do we,
Say not in residential districts, but I
Okay.
wouldn't,
Yep.
non-residential? Adding a line to the business registration for feather flags, and we'll permit through that. Have them indicate their start date or their opening date on their business registration. And then setbacks is another thing that I want to speak with, more so the city building inspector and engineer to get their thoughts on it.
And then and then community and special events C,
See,
that other,
yeah,
Which is-
2101
it's right there,
A1,
yeah.
yeah.
exactly.
2101, right.
That's under sign permits already, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, and we can have that under, and that is, one of those things, the prohibited signs are at the end of the section. I think that it could be good to have that kind of double back, make sure you look back up here, because the more clear we can be in zoning ordinances, I think people really do appreciate that.
And now from the public, we've opened up a lot of opportunities for them. We haven't been, just said no.
Yeah,
No, and we've got, Mark was nice enough to tell us about all the new businesses, hopefully starting.
Yeah, that was very informative. I thanked him for that
Even
one.
though it's probably only 4 or 5 you talked to 20 times each.
But isn't,
Well, no.
No, there's
because
quite a-
I-
there's
I
quite a
was-
bit.
I was looking at the different addresses, so there's. a-
Yeah.
Are you gonna get a little more?
I think there's at least 4 more restaurants coming to Manistee.
yeah.
Well, that are pretty much confirmed.
So we need more auto parts stores. Go with those restaurants.
Well, three I can speak of.
Are any of them family, no liquor,
You
like
can't tell.
family style restaurant?
You can-
And
it
are
doesn't look
any
that
of
way,
them
can you?
open later, like Big Boy and stuff, or House of Flavor after the play or
no,
movie?
Mark already told me
Go
about
ahead.
it, they went through the HGC.
Dessert, Coffee, there is nothing anymore.
Well, again, hours of operation are all driven by demand.
Yeah.
We need to know the Cinnamon Street Grill again.
Yeah, there you go.
You know?
Cinnamon Street Grill.
I think that one that
Yeah.
went through the HDC recently is pretty promising. I don't know if you looked at that one, Marlene. It's the one that's gonna be taking over the old ice cream place. That one,
Oh, yeah.
That
that's
one,
true.
their outdoor dining area looks amazing.
Yeah.
Who might that be, Mike? Who did you
Well,
say?
I mean,
The business owner that I've been working with is named John Faber.
Oh.
I know he has
Oh.
at least one partner, but yeah, they're planning on doing a kind of like to-go pickup food restaurant in a sense, but I think their use is actually gonna be more so like convenience store, cause they're gonna have, little things you can grab if you wanna go cook out on the beach or whatnot. They're gonna have like fresh meats and, stuff that you can cook yourself. Downtown Delights. And then they're fitting the whole parking lot to be a patio.
Yeah.
Same with Scooby's, it's a very similar, except you'll be able to buy a bottle of liquor
Down to lights.
to go with your
Oh.
big basket.
Yeah.
so if you're looking,
You're
like,
all seniors.
we don't have an application or anything, but it went through the HDC. So
Right.
that's the only reason we mention it.
Now, Katie, didn't we talk about that though? Is there a way we can,
I was just curious.
I don't know, stifle some of this stuff until it gets out where some of the
But then
the requirements are met?
Yeah.
Before the public hears about this
Right.
stuff?
I think we could maybe save that for members' discussion. I don't know if if the chair does want to move on, but that is a good point.
I mean, with that mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob. It seems like discussion is starting to move away from feather flags and accessory buildings on corner lots. Okay, I just wanted to check with you. We can talk more during members' discussion, but I felt it'd be more appropriate to
Yeah.
bring it up there.
We got no public comments, we got nobody here.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
No correspondence, obviously.
No.
no.
Anything from the membership?
Roger was just asking about, we've had this conversation about certain projects seeming to kind of make their way before the public or potentially city council prior to receiving zoning approval. That is a conversation that I had with the economic development director, Mark Miller, and I brought it up at staff meeting as well. Some of the processes, with the Oprahs and such, they don't necessarily require zoning approval prior to going before, either a preliminary presentation, because sometimes people are really just excited and they want to show what they have going
Oh,
on.
yeah.
But that was a concern for myself because, being the zoning administrator, I'm always the one to have to put the hammer down, and having things appear like, myself or the planning commission's moving the finish line when maybe we didn't know about, certain things coming forward. So I did have a conversation about that. I don't know that, there's nothing really like statutorily that we could hold them to with
No.
those processes, but it was a concern of mine as well, and it was a conversation that I had, and there were actually 2 or 3 new businesses, 2 in the city and 1 in the county, that Mark brought me in on a very preliminary meeting so that I could at least preliminarily go over, you know, these are the aspects of zoning that I'm going to be looking at with your development. And then, you know, just expressing, like I said to Bill, making sure that council is clear on when they're seeing something, if it has gone for zoning approval yet, that those things could always be subject to change if they're not meeting the zoning ordinance.
So like Katie
So-
keeps reaffirming preliminary,
Right.
and that's because you might ask us a question related to a setback on a certain side road, and we might say, this is what it is. By no means did we say your project was good to go. By no means did zoning sign off and say it's good. And we really want to emphasize that just because you've asked us a question does not mean that you are good to go, nor that are we backtracking. You might not have given us the whole
Right.
what you're going to do, and therefore we find problems. That's why we have checklists, we have site plan review requirements, and I think that sometimes when it gets before council, they see it and they're like, wow, this is great, let's do it. But like, even some of the things that we've seen with one that recently went through Oprah, I was in the crowd and I just kept quiet because it's not my place to say, you know, whether they should pass their Oprah or not, but that had not gone through zoning. And so what they're presenting, then council in the community gets upset that this is not what we got in the end. Like, it goes through you guys and it by no means matches up.
Right.
So
Well, and the
it-
flip side of that is the developer sometimes has the understanding that, well, city council thought this was great and I got my approval from city council, and that's just,
Right.
not understanding the entirety of the process.
So
This is something that I've been complaining about for my 6 years that I've been on here. And I know Mark has had talks with Rob and with Zach. I don't like finding out about stuff that's gonna be a new restaurant
right.
in the newspaper.
I know.
I really hate that.
We've
I
asked for a long time to have something
Yep.
given to us with plans, maybe they haven't gone through, but this is something that could be
Right.
happening.
I think that when we look at it, I understand the frustration from your end. I think it is a bit of a process problem about which comes first, the chicken or the egg. A lot of times, from a development standpoint, they're trying to move forward with their request, and they might modify and change their plan as the time goes. But I think it's also important that city council is well aware, and maybe should ask that question as well when they're giving these Oprahs out. Has planning reviewed this? And a review is much different from has planning approved this?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And if it has not, has this gone through the planning commission? Because
Does it at least show up on the desk?
right,
Right.
in its entirety. I mean,
agree.
the first time I looked and reviewed what was on the screen was the same as everybody else sitting in the audience that night, and I was like, that doesn't meet zoning, and I knew it right off the get-go. I was not asked the question by council, and they never asked the question, and I was not in my official capacity that night. I was there as part of the leadership committee, and so I sat back and looked at it, and then I did have a conversation later with some people and just said, hey, I see issues with this. I know it's not come before the planning commission or even our department. We know we'll see it, but council was really adamant that night that they were sick of seeing plans that came before them get approval and then they're not what shows up, in real life.
Yeah, and I think,
And I understand Mark's point of trying to keep things quiet and under.
He has a
wraps.
confidentiality
Right.
I
issue, so.
understand that issue, but if they're presenting something to city council,
Right.
they need to at least bring it to us too, just so we can know what's going on.
We,
and I think that Mark has been, more conscious of that with the more businesses coming through, but I will reaffirm with him that this was a topic of discussion.
You're the third one that has told him these things.
Okay, yeah, I can reaffirm that with him, that, yeah, and I think you should too, that, that if there's something going before council, the planning commission would greatly appreciate even just a preliminary, this is what's going on.
Just a heads up that something's gonna be opening
Right,
up
because,
there.
you guys are faces of the community as well, and I hear this from my townships, even on little things, if we're kind of moving with something or working on something that elected officials or planning commissioners aren't aware of. They just feel, you know, if someone from the public comes up and asks them about it, they feel a little bit sheepish if they're like, well, I had no idea that was even going on. How did I not know?
And I've had to
Right.
give that answer to people going, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then they think you're lying, because I've had that, have been approached and that, and I'll say, well, I don't know anything about it. You feel kind of stupid that just a regular resident knows more than you that's on the
Well,
board,
with that
you know?
Or they
thought
read the
in-
paper before you did and you're like,
That
oh.
thought in
yeah.
mind, then, what the heck is happening with the Chippewa taxi place here, right here on the corner of First and Maple?
By the library.
Nothing has really moved on that. I know a couple.
Oh, they're having a restaurant there.
Yes, that's their idea, but I have not received any official application. I haven't received anything.
So that's exactly what we're talking about.
That's what I mean.
So,
Right.
It's,
it's an environmental issue, I don't know that still has been completely
I don't know
addressed yet.
and we would not be privy to that because like we, when we get an application, you know, we might have a preliminary conversation on it. We have many that never come to fruition. And if we sat down and said, oh yeah, this is coming in, or this is, you know, something we've had, first of all, it's very unprofessional. And secondly, you know, until we do get that application, there is nothing because
It's really just
it's just
hearsay.
hearsay. And so.
When they first sold that, they said it was gonna be a drive-through coffee shop. That's a busy corner, there's no property there.
Yeah.
How can you put anything in that building?
Well, I mean, that would be where like you would come in and say, hey, we do have issues on this. If it's a special use permit, if not, and it goes through just Katie's approval, it's a change in use at that point, and then, you know, she could look at it from that aspect. I mean, so there are things that happen that, you know, depending on how they come through, as you guys are well aware, I mean, just like on the corner down here, you know, with the fences that we have up, you know, we had an approved plan on that. It just, it is not coming, they might be looking to go a different route, you know, and then that's their right to do that.
And they've changed so many times already.
yeah.
Right, but they still have to come through either for a permitted approval or a special use permit through you guys. And if it's through Katie, you know, they just have to meet the correct requirements of the zoning ordinance. That's why when we change things, it can have huge effects that we weren't even thinking about, you know, when we made it. So that's why we try to be really cautious when we make changes. And because it's not like, oh, that's only going to be one area. If you make it in the general regulations, it's the entirety of the city. And what might be good in one area might be terrible in another. So, you know, all they have to do is meet those requirements. And if they do, we have to issue a permit. We're required to. And so just like if they come to you guys for a special use permit and they meet all the special use requirements, you have to issue a permit.
Right.
It's the same thing. You kind of seen that with Pleasanton recently, and how they didn't really want that Dollar General.
Yeah.
And they fought and fought and fought, but they met the requirements of the special use permit.
How you
And
gonna do
Pleasanton has a Dollar General. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what, you know, the community has to understand that too. If they meet the requirements, you have to issue.
Yeah.
And so, that's why when we look at these things and when changes of use from like, you know, it's not conforming and then they change the use, those are really important too, because it gives us a chance to fix some of those things that might be like what you're talking about, Marlene, where you're like, oh, it's a change of use. That corner does not have visibility on it. How are you going to address this? But then you also have to look at other things when when we look at use of property in the United States, and it's property oriented versus public safety. And there's a happy middle ground there somewhere, and we have to try to find it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when we look at these uses and we're flipping them over, I can come in and promise, you know, just to bring this all the way back to what we were talking about originally, was I can promise you as a developer anything to get approval.
Right.
That might not be what comes in. And I don't right now know how to fix that for the city, what that looks like, because a lot of things are dependent on them getting an approval for that. They could go a couple of different routes, but it's really dependent on what the city wants to do. You know, again, we're subcontracted to the zoning ordinance portion of it. We can't dictate your processes.
No. Well,
If you
like
guys don't like the processes, if you complain to us, we can bring them up, but we
Right.
have really no power to change those for you.
Right. Like our cottages. The 3 cottages down there.
Well, now there's-
Come on, quit
but now there's gonna be
laughing.
a bunch of them,
Come
so
on.
it only
You know,
took
when
20
that
years.
first
but-
developer came before us,
Yeah.
there was never said that they were coming in on wheels and
Right.
stuff, you know?
But you saw the last 2 were stick-built.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
but, yeah, all
That's
3,
three,
all
yeah.
3 are stick built.
Yeah, I think there's supposed to be like 11 total when they're all done.
It's
Yep.
funny, they have 2 big ones and that real little bitty one.
That's what
you
I
know,
mean.
it just-
And how, would you confirm that as a cottage?
Yeah, cottage can be a 1-bedroom little thing, yeah.
Yes, but 1-bedroom little thing, not a 3-story.
All right. Anybody else got anything?
No, yeah,
Nope.
sorry. No,
A
thank you.
motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Anybody else?
I just have one final comment, just on your guys' videos, Marlene, I tried to log in, we can get you into this. And then the question was brought up for the Master Citizen Planner continuing education credits.
Right.
There is a link provided with the same email that the webinar link came in that you click on,
Right.
and you can enter your information for your Master Citizen Planner
Oh,
credits.
then, do we pay for it there through that? I did the last time through the credit card, I mean, a time ago, through the credit card,
No, the,
$60.
I covered it with the city, I invoiced
I
the
know
city.
you did, so that's what I told them on the internet. I said, I have to check with you first and
Yep, everyone was paid for. So you don't, yeah, it came out of the training budget.
3?
Could you send that to me?
I believe when I registered everyone, I had them sent to your emails. You have to email back
Yeah.
to what you received to request a link for the videos.
But it's super easy, you just click on the.
Did you? yeah,
I can
think-
double check what
yeah,
email
see,
I
make
used
sure
for
send
you.
it To my
Normal.
Mick Shemansky 52
Yeah.
at Gmail.
Not the one that
Okay.
bounces back.
Because, yeah, the one that, they
City
took me
has.
off.
Can't blip that one out, you're gonna be getting all kinds of stuff.
I noticed that I was getting returned to sender for your city email.
So-
Yeah, I'll make sure that I have the correct email for you, and I can follow up with, Kara with
Okay,
MSU
great.
Extensions and have her resend the link if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be
Uh-huh.
great.
Aren't they right in your same building, the extension?
Well, there's,
A couple of
the
'em.
educators in there.
But
the-
they're not involved?
They're not the ones running the program.
Oh, yeah.
Same entity, different department.
That's all I had, thank you.
Different spokes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Still haven't finished all of mine, but.
All righty.
Anything else over there?
Oh, no, I'm good, or we're good.
And we had a motion to adjourn by Mick.
Motion?
I'll second it.